Hello and welcome to Beyond the Printed Page Virtual Piano Clinic with Randall Faber and Brian DiBlassio. I'm Chrissy Klobes. I'm a Senior District Sales Manager here at Hal Leonard. I'm also the Marketing Liaison for Piano Adventures. So without further ado, let's bring on Randall Faber.
Greetings and welcome, everybody. Delighted to be here with you. We're broadcasting from the Faber Institute, and I'm here with my colleague, Brian DiBlassio, pianist and professor of jazz studies. Welcome, Brian.
Welcome.
Give him a big welcome. Brian has been with us in the early days of Piano Adventures when we were doing our 1,000 arrangements of PreTime to big time jazz and blues and pop and hits and so on. So welcome back, Brian. He's been working with us now as a clinician and collaborator on our Creative Improv online. So we're doing a lot of videos together on the website to support improvisation. Well, today's session is called Beyond the Printed Page. Now, you probably know Nancy and me for the many printed publications and the arrangements that we've done of pop and all, as well as the method. But there's something that you can do here that takes us one step deeper, one step further, an important step towards becoming a fully equipped musician. And that is digging into the page and digging into the sounds to go deeper to find fundamental patterns. So I know we have a lot of teachers here with us, so we'll share some tips that you can use in your teaching. We also want to welcome all of you pianists and students, aspiring pianists, and we'll be sure to share some tips with you as well. So what does this mean then to go deeper? Brian and I like to use this word of opening up a tune. So we're going to find out what's really there. We can think of a three-step process. I like to call it that we break it down and then build it out and bridge across. So if you're a teacher, this is a great sequence. In other words, we're going to dig into the page and we're going to break it down to the simplicities. Then from that simplicity, we can build it out again with creativity, improvisation, variations. And then the bridging across might be something like transposition. It could be taking a completely different tempo or a different sort of rhythm, or finding similarities in other pieces. So if you're familiar with our discussions of educational theory for creativity, we talk often about analysis, creativity, and expression. So you see, breaking it down is an analysis, isn't it? And then building it out is creative, and bridging across, we could think of that as ways of being expressive. So that's a little bit of a philosophical background. Before we get into some pieces and opening those up, I just want to highlight that. What does this mean on that simplicity? When we're looking for patterns, what exactly are we thinking of in patterns? It's very easy, especially for we piano teachers, to say we're going to look at patterns in the score. But I just want to remind us that we're really dealing with sound, aren't we? So as much as you can, we want to be listening and hearing the patterns in the sound. And then the next most important is let's look at the patterns on the keyboard, because we're visualizing the keyboard here, and this is what translates into sound. So sound is the most important, and then our patterning on the keyboard is next most important. And the score can be important and so valuable, but it's really a map, isn't it? So it's a representation of our sound. So that's the priority. What we hear, what patterns can we hear, how can we play those out on keyboard patterning, and then how might it lay out on the mapping on the score. If we think of something as simple as a D minor chord, okay, you know, D minor, it almost is meaningless if we just set it here as this snowman of space, space, space. But is that really a good rendition from the sound perspective of a D minor? Well, maybe instead, if we put our root in our fifth and we have the third up here, very different sound, or we put the... Notice this rearranging of those three tones makes all the difference in terms of sound, and yet it's conceptually D minor. So do think then, in terms of these representations that we can talk about as music theory, but don't let the theory part of it dominate. The sound dominates. The theory is just a construct that helps us talk about it. So we'll get more into it here as we open up tunes. Let's go over to Brian for our first tune today.
Okay, great. Thanks, Randy. I love the term simplicity in sound because that's what it's really all about. with you and your students, you can feel free to slowly wade into these concepts and sounds without being overwhelmed. So one sound in itself can be beautiful. We'll talk about many sounds, and so if you have an advanced student or you're an advanced student yourself, you can feel free to maybe move a little faster through the progression. But if this is a new concept, feel free to just slowly explore one sound at a time. We're going to talk about 6 tunes today, and the first tune will be from the Fun Time Jazz and Blues Level 3, and that will be In the Mood, which is actually the first track or tune in the book. So a classic, iconic jazz tune. And then later tunes we'll talk about aren't necessarily jazz, but they can also be opened up and freely explored and have some creative fun with those as well. But since we're starting off with jazz, let's talk about what makes jazz fun and what makes jazz so appealing. It probably boils down to the rhythm and maybe a little more theoretically, the chromaticism in jazz, right? So we're not going to have a jazz lesson today, but we're going to offer you one simple technique that can immediately give you a jazz flavor, a jazz spice. And that is, I'm going to call that bending the third, which is on my first slide here. So everything I just played there, believe it or not, is just 4 notes. 4 unique notes, that is, because I'm repeating them across octaves. So this is maybe a great first step for you and your students. You know, we learn notes on one clef and one staff, but when you look at the piano, obviously we see multiple Gs, right? We can also see multiple G chords across the piano. And many of the tunes in the method will help the student slowly expand to octaves. So you can do this also with your creative playing. Get outside of the box, get outside of that treble clef. Because if I'm improvising and having fun just within the treble clef, doesn't sound, just like Randy's example, doesn't sound quite the same, right? Now I'm expanding across many octaves, and that one special note, getting back to that bent third, I'm playing a chromatic note. You can see this on your screen here. I'm playing a chromatic note going to the middle of the G chord. And that creates let's say a jazzy effect. If I was playing guitar, I could bend a guitar string. If I was playing the harmonica, I could bend air with my lungs. We're playing actually a percussive instrument, right? So we need to bend the note and simulate that fun, bluesy sound. And just with that one piece of chromaticism, that chromatic note, got a great jazz sound. Again, 4 notes. Okay, and back to the tune. Our first few measures are exactly arpeggiating a G major chord in first inversion, so I may have overlooked that, but let's remember that we're looking at a G major arpeggio, and that iconic tune and theme is straight from an arpeggio. Going on to the next chord and the next measures, at measure 5, we're going to go to the key of C, as many tunes do, as many blues tunes do, pop tunes as well, classical pieces too, and we'll bend that one as well. So bending the third and G position, and we can do the same thing in the C position. And to help you remember all the materials today, you'll get the handout from the Hal Leonard session, and also you can check it out on Piano Atlas as well. Bending a third. Okay, so let's put them together now, and I will start with the beginning of the tune, slowly have some fun, bending those thirds in the middle of a G position. Here I go to C. Back to G. How about back to the tune now at measure 9? And first or second ending. Okay, now the tempo. So first is building it out, right? So you're building out that sound. The breakdown is looking at those chords, those 2 chords, and adding those chromatic notes. Then you build it out and you explore. Maybe the hardest step for the student is the tempo thing. So you don't have to require a tempo constraint immediately. You can play it open like a rubato statement. Oh, what's my next one? Oh yeah, I'm going to C. Okay, here I go. Still fun, still sounds fine. And then later you can think about tempo as maybe a next step for your student. So with all these tunes and all of these windows and pockets and tunes we're looking at today, remember, you can always back up, try one sound at first. It doesn't have to be so overwhelming. You don't need a degree in jazz theory to do this. Everyone's available to improvise and just wade gently into the water with a little creativity. So let's head to the next tune now, and back to Randy.
Thank you, Brian. I love this idea of everybody can take a little bit of a step into creativity. And remember, title of the method is Piano Adventures, and we like to suggest be adventurous. And it's for both you as a teacher and our students. If we take that adventuresome spirit, that means we're curious about, we're willing to try. So don't be afraid to dive into some exploration. It's just sound. You can't hurt anything by playing wrong notes. All you do is see what works and see what doesn't. So you want to actually cultivate that exploration attitude on the part of your student. So even in the lesson, if you're making mistakes poking around, it's okay, because then the student sees it's okay to poke around and make mistakes. But that's how we're connecting with the sound, right? Sometimes we get too caught up with perfection and there's right notes and wrong notes. Well, we can't learn if we're not exploring and to see how they sound. So shift gears a little bit that way here, and I think it really helps out. Let's take a look at a little easier level. We're going back to level 2B of Piano Adventures. In the lesson book, I'm opening up here the song Almost Like a Dream. And so we're in the key of A minor. We could scan the music and you see, this is very A minor, like we've got all this A minor triads. But let's dig in here. Let's break it down a bit and we'll see what we've got. Okay, so we've got this A minor, don't we? We could be in different octaves. We can shift an octave here, and then maybe this part. Okay, just did a little rearranging there. So what do we see? Okay, we've got this great A minor patterns going on, and what we're seeing here is the fifths, but we can tell the student, okay, what's missing? Our third is missing, but where is that third then? It's picked up here. So while we miss that third here, we're gonna make sure we catch it in this segment. Now, what about this chord movement here? Okay, we have F, but notice the right hand's staying with A minor. So we've got this layering going on, don't we? We have F, A, C, and we have this E. Now, at this level, we don't want to talk about a major seventh chord and get into that kind of a bigger harmonies, but we can talk with the student on how we can layer in thirds. And here, in one of the videos on Creative Improv, we go into this more detail. I'd like to call this nesting. We're nesting in thirds. In other words, if we have this that works, then a third away will work also, won't it? And a third away again can work. And then here what we're actually doing is going down a third. We go down another third. And in other words, we can kind of separate things by thirds, or we could even nest in seconds as another option. So in this piece, we hear and we see that nesting in thirds by moving down to here. And if we can go down for it, maybe we can go up in thirds. So let's take our first line. Maybe we go up, and then we go to the F, go up a thirds, and so forth. So explore the patterns that you're seeing here, but notice how we're building out on those patterns, doing something a little different than the pattern. One other point to make, what is the unusual note in this whole piece? Notice at the end, all of a sudden this F sharp comes in. And just as Brian pointed out that that third being bent is especially expressive because it doesn't fit typically on our scale, when you have something like this that's an unusual sound, maybe we want to make it even more expressive. So we're going to really make that special. And in your improvisation then, maybe we want to maybe we want to pick that up in the improvisation because we've already noticed how it was special. So let's play with that sound. Let's learn what made it special, what made it different. And these special notes are sometimes those that are outside of our typical scale. To you, Brian.
All right, so let's move on with some more inspiring sounds here. Love that chord progression, and that is from, we're back to level 3 now, and this is Lunar Eclipse. That was the B section of Lunar Eclipse. Or the rich harmony that it has to offer. That's one of the reasons I love the method, is the inspiring, mature harmonic sounds in the method. So, you know, students can be introduced to these very mature sounds while still learning the basics of the piano. And this is one of the perfect examples of that. So what I'm going to suggest is the window here is to open up the B section of the piece. Okay, if we can go to that slide, focusing in on the B section of Lunar Eclipse. So I'm at measure 17 right now. And what we're going to build here is a collection of notes to explore and improvise. It's getting a little more specific now, and there are collections of notes, but still these collections of notes are something that your student can handle. So even though I'm about to show you the 4th mode of E flat harmonic minor, we don't want to share that with our young student, right? But the young student can think, oh, I can play 3 black keys in the 3 black key grouping, and I can play the first 4 notes of a C minor scale. Because those are included, those concepts are included in the method up to this point. So let's dig in here. So we're focusing in. Remember, when you do creative improv, you can focus in closely, explore, and then focus back out. So it's not an all-at-once thing, and that way you can be comfortable with you and your student on how quickly you progress and look at some of these concepts here. So my red circle here, this is actually A half diminished, which as a teacher you might like to know. The notes that go good with this would be C minor position. So a nice C minor position. If we could go back to the keyboard view there, and we can look at the C minor position visually, there it is. So simply by the magic of putting an A bass under a C minor, we get an A half diminished sound. So you're setting about to offer the C minor position for your student and use the existing left hand right out of the arrangement, the composition. So there's that pretty sound. So your student is actually improvising in A half diminished, whether they know it or not, just by knowing the C minor position over the existing written left hand 7th. Okay, so that sound happens to work twice in our B section. Then we go to the second sound, which is really cool. That's that really pretty exotic sound. If, as a teacher, we want to know it's A flat 13 sharp 11, which is super fun, and as a student, the toolkit here is the 3-note set of black keys that we, of course, know all the way back from the primer level, right? 3 black keys. And then also the first 4 notes of the same C minor position. So you put those together as a pool of notes that you can improvise with. Again, no tempo constraint, so it's free. 3 black keys. C minor. Doesn't it sound pretty? 3 black keys. So your student might not need or want to know E flat melodic minor yet, but they're free to improvise immediately with that cool sound. All right, and then our 4th sound, or 3rd sound I should say, because we've only done 2 so far, would be having some fun here and saying wiggle the G, wiggle the D. It's just that easy, right? So I'm not saying a G altered scale with sharp 5s and sharp 9s and flat 9s, right? So overly theoretical, immediately accessible. So that's how you can balance the 2 things. Wiggle the G, wiggle the D, wiggling the D up and to a black key, that is. So again, choosing some nice choice chromaticism, because that really hits the essence of this neat G7 sound. And then if I want to, I can connect it with an F. So what's really going on here is you're choosing this group of notes. Now that group of notes is quite confusing, right? Because it doesn't look like D minor, it doesn't look like, oh, it looks like a bunch of different things. So that would be confusing to a student, but wiggling a G, wiggling a D, much more approachable, and then bridge the two together with an F. So it sounds like this. All right, so again, those are one sound at a time that you can dive in and explore, and then it's time to put them all together. Focus out a little bit, and you can think, okay, first I do sound 1, C minor. Then I do sound 2, that's the fun one with the 3 black keys. And the C minor notes. Then I go back to sound 1 again, my good old C minor. The piece is in C minor too, which is helpful. And here's the wiggle sound. Focusing out even further, we can head back to the piece then. So let me play a little bit going into the improv section. And like I mentioned on the last tune, this is definitely a cadenza feel and doesn't necessarily require a tempo. So here's measure 13, jumping into the piece. All right, here I go, cadenza. First sound, second sound. Taking my time. First sound again, C minor. And my G sound. Bring the piece back. So that's a look at some rich, mature harmony in level 3 and getting an idea of how to dive in, look at sounds, focus out, put them together, focus out even further, and then suddenly your student is improvising on the bridge, as it's called, of a tune in the method. Okay, great. At this point, I think we're going to go back out to Chrissy and Hal Leonard, and we're going to open things up for a Q&A.
All right, so first question. I have seen Dr. Faber's improv skills in his various instructional videos, especially adult piano adventures, for example, and they are great. In addition to playing around with existing pieces, which I already do with students, I think teachers could benefit a lot from a book series specifically dedicated to creative skills, improv, arranging, composition. Is that in the works, perhaps? Even better, while there are some lead sheets and improv sprinkled into various piano adventure series, it would be great if these skills were incorporated into the core series. So I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you for that. It's interesting, you know, years ago when we first wrote Piano Adventures, we had a tremendous amount of improvisation in the method. But at the time, our publisher, our first publisher and the editors just thought, no, you can't put improv in there, it'll scare the teachers. So over the years, you know, we've been talking with thousands of teachers, and the world has changed, and the improvisation is much more accessible and in the bone, so to speak, I think, of the world. So we feel it is ready to do more improvisation, and with the second edition, we added more, and we're ready to add even more yet. So we do have a creative theory concept sketched out, so we're going to do some print publications that support the improvisation. But importantly also is that this is a teacher-led and guiding the student and maybe even modeling for the student improvisation. So before we released that, we wanted to make sure we gave you, as teachers, resources so that you could feel secure in some elementary approaches to improvisation, some tools that you can use with the very lesson book pieces that you're teaching. Then you are in control, you can guide the student, and it becomes kind of your ownership, if you will. So with that in mind is why we've given the Creative Improv Online resource to support the lesson book pieces so that you can open those tunes out, you can break down, build it out, and bridge across. And as you're developing those skills, your own tool set improves. But long story short, yes, indeed, we have more materials, including print supplements that we'll be releasing specifically in this subject.
Wonderful. So many resources available. And then second question to Brian, I would like to know, what software do you use to show the piano keys that you're playing?
That software is called Ridiculous, which is a funny play on words, MIDI and ridiculous. So it's ridiculous MIDI capability, a really fun program. And it's done by a fairly independent software developer. So I might encourage that you folks check that out.
Awesome. And then from Laura Camp, I love the Primer Level Adventures Learning videos. Any plans to continue this to other levels?
Oh, I think you're referring to the adventure learning videos that we've just released, almost exploratory. And yeah, we're thinking of all levels, but we wanted to get feedback from you as teachers first. How do you like them? Is it too much video for the students, or are they inspired by them? So we're waiting to hear from you, and we're just have it kind of queued up to do more. You know, the world is changing, and with the students watching YouTube, videos becoming more ubiquitous. So we want to make sure that we capitalize and utilize the video as a resource, because it's a great model for the student. So, but the key is we don't want to bypass teacher in that. So we want to give you the teacher resources first, and then give resources to the student. So let us know, email back at faber@pianoadventures.com or in the chat room here. And if you'd like those adventure learning videos, we're by all means plan to take them to other levels. Great question.
Excellent. All right, I guess we're ready to move on. Let's bring it back to Randy and Brian.
Thank you. Great. Well, let's go. We were looking at level 2B lesson book with that Almost Like a Dream. And most of you know that we have the supplemental arrangements at each level. So at level 2B, it's the Chord Time books. Chord Time Pop, Chord Time Disney, Chord Time Classics, Jazz and Blues, and so on. And so I've just brought out here Chord Time Hits. And I thought we could look at a piece here, because what's nice about the chord time is we are focusing in on analysis of chords to recognize those patterns. It's implicit here, especially at this chord time level, with 1, 4, and 5, and in this particular book, 1, 4, 5, and 6 chords. So let's dig in a little bit. I'll play the arrangement of High Hopes, and then we'll dig in to see what chord pattern do we have. Let's start with that opening. We've got this. And that pretty much establishes our chord progression there, doesn't it? So we've got this standard 1 to 4 pattern, but we're beginning on the 4 chord, so we'll put the 4, step 4 in the bass, our B flat, and then the 1. And here, if you like, just to kind of bridge out or build out on that, how about an octave? So feel free, octave, up and octave. Something like that helps, doesn't it? It gives it a really nice big bottom, and the student feels like they're doing big things. So we have this 4 to 1, and then we're going D minor, and there's A minor. And that's almost what we're doing throughout the piece. But if we keep going through here, there's our B flat, but we've got that A against it, don't we? But remember we said we could nest chords, so when we go another third, that A is just a third up, so it fits in nicely. And there's the F, D, and there's the C. Let's go to our warm-up slide, and we'll see if that can help the student find these chords. Let's do our F warm-ups, and we see here's our 1 chord, and then the 4, and a 1, 5, 1. We could have done it down here in root position, couldn't we? So let's look at the next one. Here's our 1, and then 3, 4, 5, and up to 6. and 6, 5, 4, inversion of the 4, 1. Makes a great little warm-up. Of course, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 as possibilities, but we're focusing here 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So what do we have in this piece? It opened up 4 and 1. So just like our beginning here, but instead of F to B flat, it went B flat to F. Now let's just move ahead in that second warm-up and notice our D minor and C. And that's what we have in the second part of this. There's our D minor going to C. So right out of here, D minor and to C. So those 4 circled chords then basically give us the chord progression. We're just going to reverse the B flat and F. So go 4 and 1, then 6 to 5. Now what's kind of interesting on this, if we look at that second warm-up, notice how close this 6, 5, and 4, they're right in a row, aren't they? So if we were in a D minor, and you could almost expect a complete piece to be in that sort of a mode of kind of like green sleeves down to C and the B flat, right? But when we go F, it kind of throws us out of that, and we think of the 4 a little differently. But 6, 5, and 4 are all very close together. So our pattern then, it goes 4, 1, 6, 5, and then again the 4, 1, and 6, 5. But if we look through the piece, every other 8 bars here, instead of going from the 6 to the 5, it goes at D minor, the 6, and then down to A minor instead. If we look at that root movement, B flat down to the F was down a 4th. So when we go to D, not out of the question to go down to 4th also. There's kind of a parallel there. And that's what we see in the introduction too, don't we? Have that D minor going to A minor instead of a C. Is there some relationship there? C or A minor? Remember our nesting? We have thirds. C is almost a variation of A minor, or A minor a variation of C. They just nest on top of each other. So many shared tones. So no wonder they replace each other here in the piece. So here's our melody. Now we know that was 4 to 1, right? There's our D minor to C, continuing. D minor, and there's our A minor. That's the little variation. Then it repeats again. Same thing, B flat F, D minor C, B flat F, D minor, A minor. So where do we have, even the whole next chorus is the same thing, but if we wanted to go to the bridge, let's look at the next page. This is quite expressive bridge here. I love this. So what's expressive about it? Well, you look at the accidentals, right? What doesn't belong? So we go F, and that's that augmented. We're stretching this F up to this D, but not just to the D, but then we're pulling this E over top. So we have this wonderful stretching of the non-chord. And then here, instead of the 4, we have a minor 4. But notice also that B flat, excuse me, the D flat, that's the same as this C sharp, isn't it? So with up, here, and back down. But instead of coming back to F augmented, we have both of these tones here pulling down. So it's a wonderful little progression. If you want to do more with it, maybe we can roll it in left hand. Hang on there a little bit, and then one little note for expression, we said we want to break it down. So we broke it down just to these 4 chords, basically, build it out. Maybe play it again with just block chords. So we're taking our block chords so the student really sees how that progression works. And one other note on expressing it, bridging across, you could replay these. Like, what if we, instead of going D minor to C, what if we went C to D minor? So now we have 4 chords to 1, C to D. In other words, same 4 chords, but we just flip it. And that's so common. That chord progression is so common. You want to flip it again, another bridging across, start at a different chord. What if you started at the C or started at the D minor? And then B flat, F, C. So write these 4 chords out, in other words, on a piece of paper, and then just start at either one and keep looping them through. And you can have all kinds of improvisation patterns that way. That can be quite fun. I want to mention one other little expressive point. Notice the dynamic forte. We usually think of, okay, forte is going to be when that melody comes in because we want to soar the melody, but sometimes you can reverse it. So if we're really big here in our intro, notice I pulled back for the melody, so that way we really come in big on that opening, and that saves room to come big at the chorus as well. Then pull back for the bridge, let it grow, and you get a dynamic shaping. Even though we're essentially using just these 4 chords, we still have this breathing and breadth, you might say, through the whole piece. All right, to Brian.
All righty, we're going to bounce to level 4 in the lesson book and play the first piece there and explore that a little bit. So it's Aurora Borealis, another selection with really deep, rich, inspiring harmony. So here, we're going to celebrate the harmony and work on identifying the harmony a little bit and identifying it in a way that the student can also recognize it. And a little less exploration across the entire keyboard, but just kind of bathe in these beautiful harmonic sounds and change them a little bit and just identify with these harmonic sounds. So to do this, we're going to do a basic technique of combine the melodic into the harmonic. So this piece can allow for taking all of the melodic notes and putting them all together and getting a beautiful harmonic sound. So the first 2 measures, for instance. We bring those all together and we play them harmonically, and suddenly we have a harmonic sound or chord change, you could say, right? So this is a little bit of more of a deeper dive for a more advanced student, but it still can be fun and rewarding if it's under, the right circumstances. So I've started a model on the next slide here of how to move through and combine the melodic into the harmonic, identify these sounds, and maybe explore with them a little bit. Okay, so my green box here is the D major add 9, and then our next little red box is the A over C sharp. Okay, and I'm going to add a 6 to that in the second sound. So already it may sound like it's getting complicated, but your student already knows a D chord, your student already knows an A chord, right? So to look at something that says A/C sharp looks a little visually confusing, but if it's offered as I'm playing a major chord and then in my bass note, my left hand, I'm playing the middle of the major chord, also known as the third, right? So I have 3 positions for each of these chord changes. In the first position, you see the nuts and the bolts of the chord. In the next position, you see maybe a little something extra added to it, and in the third position in my boxes, you'll see as it's actually played and it occurs in the piece. Okay, so there's my second sound. Let's go to the third sound, represented in the yellow box. D, good old D major. And the magic of those nesting thirds and building thirds is if we put a B under a D, we magically get B minor 7, right? So again, B minor 7 may be a little more intimidating than play a D chord in your right hand and play a B in your left hand bass. Then you get this beautiful sound. All right, that's sound number 3. And next sound, F sharp minor. Again, this is level 4, But even for younger kids, you'd be surprised if you ask a 7 or 8-year-old to play C major, if they know their C major chord, then you say, oh, put your thumb on this black key. And now can you play the same chord? And they might go like this. And then you can play, maybe by shielding the piano, do a little ear training at the same time. You can play that chord, and you'll be surprised how fast they find something as complicated as an F sharp major chord, right? I'm speaking about earlier levels now. Level 4, probably easier for your student. But the point is, your students are capable of doing a lot just by ear and by feel, and the theory can later catch up. So you don't necessarily have to wait until they're reading 6 sharps in order to play a complicated chord. So just a little side note there. So anyway, my third little box here, the blue box, F sharp over A. All right, so that's first breaking down those chords, right? But I'm doing so by combining the melody and making it harmonic. And then you can gently explore with each sound. So my hand is in the position of the first sound right now. I'm not doing much at all, just wandering a little bit. See how beautiful that sounds? That's engaging. It's more of an ambient, relaxing kind of improv, but it will get your student to put their hands in the harmonic position and just explore a little bit. There's going to a new octave, and that'll expand it a lot already. So again, it's out of time. It can be a relaxed rubato statement, and it helps with chord identifying at the piano, with or without the theoretical names. You can stop so far as to name the triads, which your student is familiar with, and just freely explore those chords. Pedal is probably really important in this example because it helps sustain these beautiful sounds. And if you or your student are more adventurous, you can continue traveling through the tune and do this for all of the chords, all the way through the first half. I have a video that demonstrates this and then goes back out, focuses out again, and completes the piece. So an exploration of maybe some deeper, richer harmonic sounds in level 4 in Aurora Borealis.
Very good. Let's look at a little, continuing in the higher levels of piano adventures, our level 5. I just brought up the Shenandoah. As you may know, in our level 4, we worked through many sharp keys, right? The key of G, of course, D, those are reviews, but then we added A and E. So here in level 5, we're going to go through the black keys, but we're also going to do a nice review of what we've done before. What's interesting is we keep moving out at these higher levels. We're trying to come back to our chords, even 1, 4, and 5, but start to see them as spreading out across the keyboard. So, of course, we get our inversions. That's old hat now. And we want to take the inversions like choral reef etude, 1, in all inversions, and then the 4 in all inversions, and 5. And back to 1. So as we're moving through other keys, like here, key of E, let's 1 in all inversions, a 4, and 5, and 1. And then we give little warm-ups. And this one here, we're going to have this bass here. And what is that bass doing? If we do our break it down, we've got our root 5th, root again, and it walks up here to the 3rd, doesn't it? So it's if we pulled out this 3rd in the chord and we bring it here, and we have, I can put it up an octave, and let's go to the 4 chord. There's our A right there, isn't it? Take it up an octave, 5 chord, here's our 5, so root 5th up to the 3rd, and back to 1. And indeed, that's the warm-up that we give prior to Shenandoah. So really utilize those warm-ups. And then as the student plays Shenandoah, they'll see these chords laid out already. They'll recognize their 1, 4, and 5, as well as the 6th chord, right? So what's our 6th chord in E? That'll be our C sharp. And so the student, when they do get to that 6th chord, they're going to recognize, I know that one also. So any chord that comes up, we're going to want to mark in with a pencil, have the student write in the chord name. And then they'll probably enjoy something like this warm-up. So take the warm-up through many keys, just like the Coral Reef opening warm-up in the book. Take that through all keys, sharps and flats. Take the Shenandoah warm-up and don't do it just in E. Put it in whatever keys the student might be playing in. Well, let's give a listen, and then we'll do more breaking it down, building it out, and bridge across. This is Shenandoah. So we're hearing 1, 4, and 5 with this accompaniment pattern. And also notice we are working through our E major scale. In fact, what's our melody? Let's break it down a little bit. 5 to 1, right? Then what? It's kind of moving to 5, isn't it? But it stretches over. And that's a great little spot for a little 4 chord. Now, top of the scale, back to that 6, so we have our 4 chord, and back to 1. I like to have the student kind of pick out that melody almost with one finger, so they get the idea, what is it doing? It's stretching over 5, so we're just walking up to this 5. We have to hear that and get that sense in our mind, because that's part of the simplicity, isn't that? That's the melodic simplicity, and of course we're seeing how that melody maps into our chords. So step 6, so that's going to go nicely with that 4. Notice here something like this. We very much have a folk song here, don't we? So in terms of prioritization of our E major tones, let's look at, we get this little bump of that E, A may fight that E chord. So let's just eliminate that A for now, and our leading tone might fight with things as well because that half step, so let's eliminate that. What do we have left? 7 major tones, but taking out step 4 and leading tone gives us 1, 2, 3, and 5, and 6. So we'll think of 5 and 6 down here. So now we've got some wonderful tones. In other words, these are some wonderful improvisation tones. Pentatonic scale, steps 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. Depending on your key, you're going to have to find which finger works. So I've got my thumb here on the white keys. If you need a little help getting through there, sometimes that C natural flatted 6 is a little option. Sometimes flatted 3 is an option. That can help you get around the keyboard. Now, one question that often would come up is if I'm using my E pentatonic scale for my improvisation, what do I do on the 4 chord? Do I switch to an A scale now? Well, we're still in the key of E, so just think of that E pentatonic on the 1 chord, and on the 4, and on the 5. In other words, don't change your scale. It'll still work through all of those chord changes. But When you are on the other chord changes, you have more options, don't you? We can go to that A on that 4 chord. We can go to the leading tone on the 5. But do think of that pentatonic as being robust and of your safe tones throughout your whole piece as long as you're in the key here of E. Those are your safety tones, and it's a great way to start. Just don't get too caught up with the coordination of the left hand. Work through some sounds that work, for you. In other words, we might just stop right there, give yourself a rest. And find how you can make that left hand have sufficient rest so the student can improvise unimpeded by the rhythmic problem. But it'll be a good exploration for yourself also. Let me give you one other little tip. On that pentatonic scale, if you take these fourths that are embedded in it, like 5 and 2, or here, sometimes these little clusters sound very authentic to this folk sound. All righty. We talked about breaking it down and building it out. How about the bridge across? We might want to take just a moment to say, this is a little complicated maybe in E, so our first bridge across, do we want to bridge to something harder? Probably not, right? The thing to do is bridge it to something easier. So a wonderful tool is to take things back to something easy. So if you're playing in E, can we transpose that back to C? That would be a bridging across, wouldn't it? So we have a C, we can do this sort of accompaniment pattern, or importantly, what's our pentatonic scale in C? And then how about an over 4 chord and over 5? So whatever you're doing in E, take it back to C. I think that gives a great model. It helps our ear because the sound dominates, and we're also getting into our fingers, and importantly, we're getting that keyboard patterning as well. So bridge across can be the simplification for more improvisation, or it can be moving it to another key, or even other major minor modes. Brian, any thoughts on pentatonic?
Oh, I love pentatonic. It's a universal sound, and it's been here for thousands of years. The cool thing about pentatonic, if you dig a litlittle deeper, it's actually, if you unravel a pentatonic scale, it's a series of fifths. So a pentatonic scale is also the circle of fifths, which is really cool. So we can certainly see why we love the scale so much, since the fifth is so important in our music. So that's just one little fun tidbit about the pentatonic scale to think about.
Isn't it great?
Yeah.
That harmonic series that way, it's just built in. No wonder, I spent a lot of time in Asia, and in China, you hear the authentic music concerts, and you're going to hear that pentatonic scale in their
Right.
classical, we'll quote, classical authentic Chinese music. We just published a series, it just won an award recently in China. It's called Music from China, and we publish it around the world. So you might like this for your students. It's in the PreTime to Big Time series. And we're taking authentic Chinese melodies, which are largely pentatonic, and then adding some improvisational notes on it. So it's a great introduction, even at the primer and level 1, easy levels, to the pentatonic improvisation, but with very authentic China sounds. It's kind of exciting. I think you'll like it. It's a great bridge into improvisation. So pentatonic scales around the world sounds.
Absolutely. Timeless.
And for you, we'll get more into some of the support videos, but whether you in C major or A minor, just shift that bass down a third in A minor, use your same C major pentatonic scale, and you've got a nice blues sound without even changing the fingering. So it's so versatile that it'll work in this blues, it'll work in major. We'll cover that more in support. Let's throw it back to Chrissy.
Now we've got some time for our last Q&A. So if you have any questions, please put it in the Q&A tab, and I'll do my best to to read them. And so let's see here. All right. First one, do you have any tips for getting students comfortable with improvising if they've played for a while but they've never done it before?
Any thoughts, Brian?
Sure, in what we mentioned today, you can ease in with just a sound here or there. If you want to even roll it back further, you can explore just improvising on the white keys and the black keys. And a couple of videos that we have posted in the Atlas, it shows how to do that. And again, the magic of the bass note changes your reference, your harmonic reference from what you hear. So if your student plays a B down low and then plays white keys, you get some very unusual, exotic sounds. And it does not sound like anymore. So that's a way to ease in very gently to improvisation. No tempo, let the student play what they'd like, and then you can use the black keys in the same way. And it's funny that we have a tune planned to jam over together at the end. That's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to improvise on the white keys and the black keys as well. So again, by putting a bass reference down with the pedal and then playing the black keys, instantly inspiring sounds coming out of the piano for your students. So that's a really easy way to very gently ease into improv before you get down to the nitty-gritty of maybe going into measures in the pieces that you're working on.
One thing you can think of also is sometimes we get caught up with pitch, like which notes are we going to use? And oh boy, what if we hit the wrong note? But improvisation in terms of rhythm works well. I think you can see it on your improv or in our blog lineup. The kind of the 3 points I made of stages of improvisation. The first is kind of to resonate with the beat. So you feel that rhythm and you're grooving with it. That's really important. And then the next is to contribute. So you don't have to do some big lead line, but if the piece is in D minor, maybe you just, you throw these notes in here, just grooving with the rhythm a little bit with the student. And it doesn't have to be more than just contributing, like a little child that might play the tambourine a little bit on a family band, a family ensemble. And then the third level, that would be the solo, when you take the stage light. And that you need a little bit more skill. But I'd like to just highlight that. Resonating with the rhythm and the just contribution. Even if you could do just the teacher duet and vamp it over and over and give the student a little something they could contribute rhythmically on it, is a great, great stage, because that moves them from resonating into contribution.
If I could quickly add the concept of call and response in the lesson. So the teacher plays a simple small phrase with a certain set of notes and the student answers. That's also a timely, universal, culturally universal concept of call and response. So another important way and a way to engage your student with some improv, call and response.
And of course, the primer level with copycat is all built in to be able to explore those sort of sounds. And we haven't put videos up for primer improvisation yet, have we? We'll add some of those very soon, because that's a great way to step out of the box a little bit. And for those that want to dig in, check out the adventure learning videos that one of our observers here have noted, that those adventure learning videos are designed also to step a little bit out of the box. We've all noted that the kids are much more apt to do improvisation when they're young. They're less inhibited. It's kind of that middle school is the hardest. It's either the hardest or the best, but if they feel they can show off with the improvisation, they'll take to it robustly. But if they're intimidated by their peers because they're not good at it, it's a hard time to start out. So get that going early, get the creativity going early, and then let them show off during the middle school, and then they can become most professional after that.
I know adult students have that problem as well.
Yeah, we could talk about that with adults. I think, adults think that things have to be right and wrong, but it's a really great orientation when you're dealing with the adults, and we nudge this through with the supplementary videos, is to say this is an exploration of the beauty, right? And that beauty can getting a little out of the box where you explore some things, but work in simple settings, but work with that creativity and work with the expression. Really important for the adult.
Awesome. All right. Well, it looks like you did answer a lot of the questions that came through the Q&A. One other question that I've seen pop up a couple times is teachers asking about chord symbols within your music. Have you considered adding that to like the chord time books or any of the other pieces?
Yeah, that's a really good question. In fact, we just did that. We're looking at some new updates on the entire PreTime to Big Time, and one of the things we did is we put chord symbols throughout. But we have mixed feelings on it because we want the student to dig in and find the chords. So we're a little concerned that if we write the chord symbols in all the time, then the student has to not do the digging. So the idea of like a chord time is for the student to decipher it. And our expectation is that when you're in fun time, you get the pencil out and the student is writing the chords in. Chord name, right? Letter name above, Roman numeral underneath. But let the student do the dirty work. It's important because otherwise they won't learn. So we really have, we thought about this and we're almost ready to release it that way. but we're wondering if we might be sabotaging the educational mission. So if you see the chord symbols all going in, then remember, don't ignore that the student has to really figure out why they're there. And we just may pull them out in some songs just so the student does the work.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a real aha moment when the student discovers, you mean I'm just playing a C chord here? Why does it sound so good? Yes, you are. Hey, why don't you write a C on top of your music there? Yeah, so that's a funny duality in game. How much do you offer? How much do you let the student explore? So I completely agree.
It's a good point. It's funny that you say duality. You know, music and art is all about duality. You know, you go too much in one direction, it doesn't work. You go too much in the other, it doesn't work. But it's that kind of balance, it's that resistance and tension. And education is that way too. You have to give the student enough challenge so that they'll aspire to it. And you want to give them enough hints, but you don't just tell them forthright everything, because then they won't think. So you want it just enough to lead them to the point of aha, and they have that insight. Boy, do they own that knowledge once they have the insight. So when they discover this, they get really excited about it. I'd like to have my students figure out the blues scale, and when they got it, it's their blues scale. But if I just say, this is the blues scale, copy it and practice it, they don't own it the same way. And when they get to be 16, they forget that I ever taught them the blues scale. It was their thing. They figured out, yeah, that's what I want, because then they're really the musician. And then they learn also what? They learn how to learn. They're going to learn how to figure out other scales, how to find other chords. They're empowered as a musician, empowered as a learner.
I love that. Just wrapping up here, and I'll let Randy and Brian take it away. You've got a special treat for us, I've heard.
Okay.
All right.
Hit it, Brian.